I think besides the personal reasons that Tommy had, and this is probably, it is a speculation from my part. One thing that bothered Tommy, who had been very much, if not the leader, the advisor to everything, the consigliere type. I think that the fact that the Ramones' recording career did not get the level of success that was expected, that reflected on Tommy. Since Tommy was the one that had been laying down his strategy and was the man with the theory and behind the action, I think that that made him the fall guy. Rock, 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 rock.
It happened just after I left. The Rock and Roll High School was made, but they started discussing Rock and Roll High School about a month or two after I left. Originally it was supposed to be about disco music or something, and somebody came up, decided to make it about punk rock, and so the Ramones were approached at that point.
It was interesting seeing how a movie's made, you know, being involved in a movie and seeing how, you know, things are filmed and going on sets and working with actors and directors and stuff like that. It's great. Johnny didn't like doing very much unless it was fast, boom, boom, boom. The problem with movies is you got to sit around a lot until they set up the scene, and then they do the scene, and then they set in another scene. He's sitting around. There's a lot of sitting around, so he was kind of frustrated. But he enjoyed it. He's a movie buff, and he liked being around the movie scene, movie business and stuff. I enjoyed it. I was in the movie too, you know.
Oh, that was such a wonderful album to work on, you know, because I had all the time to produce. Okay, I was working with Ed Stasium, and it was just I felt like a kid in a toy store. I had full reins and everything, and we used wonderful studios, and it was great working with Mark. You know, we set up the drums and got a great drum sound, you know, and the sound on that album is magnificent. You know, we created a lot of like original sounds that were later copied by basically hard rock bands and you know, later on. That album was very influential in its sound and production techniques, and I'm very proud of Road to Ruin.
We'd like to do a little tearjerker that was written for us by Sonny Bono. This one's called Needles and Pins. I saw her to the I saw her face. It was a face I loved, and I knew I had to run away, yeah, and get down on my knees and pray, yeah, that they go well, still digging up.
first of all, the sound on the instruments are great, but we also did, on that record, we do some overdubbing also. We were trying to make a more commercial, radio-friendly record at the time, because they weren't accepting the great albums we were making before. So we were trying to maybe, if we met them halfway, we felt then they might play us on the radio. So we were going for more of a radio-friendly thing also. We're doing some overdubs on that, and there's some really nice overdubs and some production work on some of the songs. Phil Spector was a huge Ramones fan. He saw us, and he gave us the great compliment of saying that we were the first band he's seen since the Rolling Stones that excited him. So yeah, he very much wanted to work with the Ramones. I'm not quite sure he knew what he was up against. Because the Ramones were so strange to work with to begin with. And from what I hear, he's a little bit strange himself. So it's like the combination is wow.
Wanted to be more successful record-wise. They would have liked to have been in the charts with hit singles, with hit bands. That's what all bands aspire to. I mean, they had a hit with Baby I Love You, but it wasn't really them. There was a Phil Spector cover version. We did Top of the Pops, and the orchestra were there from the BBC. I mean, that's not what the Ramones were about.
I think it could have been great, but I think that Phil was just well, I don't know exactly what makes him tick. I don't know exactly, how this guy went about making all the hit records that he did, before the end of the century. But he was just crazy to the way he was doing and what he was doing, working with Ramones. It was insane.
The record company just figured, Phil was a big name. They'd attach his name to the Ramones. It'd help get them on the radio, maybe get them, break the top 3 or something. But what they hadn't taken into account was that Phil had never worked with a band like the Ramones before, never worked with anybody with the sound, and realistically hadn't done anything great in quite a while. His name didn't really carry as much weight as it had when he was doing the Ronettes and the rest of what he did. So what ended up happening was the studio was a nightmare. They didn't get along with Phil. He just killed their whole creative process in the studio, just overwhelmed them, pulled guns on them, threatened them, kicked Monty out, made Monty cry. The whole situation just turned out really bad. The album ended up being a whole lot of Phil Spector and not a lot of Ramones. And that was the beginning of a cycle of the band using producers who were not accustomed to working with bands like the Ramones, and in fact had no idea of what the Ramones were about or what their sound was about. And from that record on, from End of the Century on, it was just one bad situation after another.
What the Ramones went through with Phil Spector would have broken a lot of bands up. Every Ramones album seemed to be saved by a couple of songs. That one's got the KKK Took My Baby Away. And on any number of levels that works. A, they mention the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, talk about taboo lyrics. So A, they've got that on it. B, which I didn't know at the time, and I'm sure a lot of listeners didn't, it kind of historically came out that was Joey writing about Johnny the Nazi Johnny's certainly the Republican on this, but he's taking this a step further, and he's basically saying, Johnny, the real right-wing Republican has taken my baby away.
The girlfriend thing, that's what happened, you know. And they'd talk. It wasn't like they never said anything to each other. They had to communicate, but it's, you know, like in a van, they wouldn't talk to each other. I talked to Johnny, Johnny talked to Marky, Marky talked to Joey, Joey talked to Marky. Just Joey wouldn't talk directly to Johnny because he didn't want to talk to him.
It was noticeable, yeah, definitely. They'd sit at either ends of the bus. It used to be a bit cold between them, definitely. Yeah, you were aware of it.
When the albums were reviewed, Rolling Stone, I think, always gave them a minimum of 3 stars to all the albums. That's amazing, you know, the consistency of the quality. I think, I can't recall them getting less, well, that's possible. I remember how consistent those records were.
You know, he always had the battle with the drugs, and he just, at the time he left, we were helping him in a way, kind of structuring him, you know, because the Ramones are very structured. People think it's just like, you know, nothing's there, but it's a very structured group, you know. Down to the songs are this way and the way they look and when they move around on stage, it's all structured out. And at the time, I mean, Dee Dee's brilliant songwriter. I mean, the early Dee Dee years was incredible. So he was just flaking out. He just didn't want any more structure, and he wanted to do his own thing.
His mental stage had deteriorated so much that it was dragging the band, and when you have to tour all the time, you have to be together all the time, and the band continued to travel in a van. The crews got tour buses, but they didn't, so they had to be with each other, and it just became harder and harder to tolerate Dee Dee's behavior. When he finally decides to quit, we don't believe him. We think he's gonna come back. But when we realize it's final, then of course Johnny, as usual, took care of the situation and says, fine, we'll just find somebody else. We'll find a younger Dee Dee.
I got a phone call from a friend of mine who was playing in a band with another guy who was in a band with Joey's brother. So it was kind of like a friend of a friend of a friend. He called me up and he said the Ramones are auditioning bass players. And I was like, oh wow. I was like, well, that's kind of cool. Now, I was in the Marine Corps at the time. So he was like, you should go down. And I was like, I haven't played my bass in almost 2 years. I'm not, what am I going to go down for? He said, just go down. Just go check it out, So I thought about it. I was like, yeah, it'd be kind of cool to go down and meet them and tell everybody, yeah, I went and jammed at the Ramones. So I figured, what the hell? So I dusted my bass off and I jumped in my truck and I drove into Manhattan, right down here at 25th Street, and